Hey guys, in this video we'll see how we can add external identity provider into our application. So user can sign up and log in using the external provider. We'll see how we can use AWS Amplify Gen 2 to integrate the Google authentication. We'll see how we can use multiple external identity providers, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll use Google authentication. We'll create the developer account on Google profile. So Amplify Gen 2 provide a way to developer to integrate these external identity providers. It's support for identity provider out of the box. So it also provide a way so we can integrate OpenID Connect or SAML. So we can have possibilities to integrate third parties Auth as well. So we'll start by creating a Next.js project. In that project, we'll create Amplify template. We'll define the Cognito resource in the template, and then we'll deploy using sandbox. So let's begin by creating the Next.js project. So inside my terminal window, I'll run the command npx create next app, and then the name of the app. In this case, I'll use Amplify Auth, and then choose the default option here. So once done, let's seed into the project directory. And then here we need to create AWS Amplify template. To do that, let's run npm create amplify at the latest. So here we need to choose default project directory. Okay, once we done with the project setup, and next if I open up the Amplify docs, we need to create the developer account on Google. So to do that, I'll open up the link. So basically you will open console.cloud.google.com, and here you need to create a project, and that project will have the credentials that we'll use inside our code. And to create a new project, I'll open up the model here and we'll select the new project. Now here I need to enter the project name. Let's say Amplify Auth, and then hit create. So it created the project, and now I'll open up the credentials window here. And inside that, I can see the create credentials button here. But if you cannot see this button, you have to create something called consent screen. Now here basically you define the scopes that your authentication configurations will use. For example, what properties you are interested in when you authenticate the user, like email or profile ID or profile picture or phone number. So all the scopes you define here. So once you're done with that, you will move to credential screen here, and here you will need to create the credentials of your for your application. Now select the second options here. Here you will choose the application type, then you will give it a name, and below that, for now we'll leave them empty, but later on we'll need to add the URL here. So those URL will used by Google to see if the request is valid or not. So for now, let's create. And here I will get the client ID and client secret from Google. So let's securely download them. And also we need them inside the code. Later on, we'll see how we can use them. Now inside VS Code, if I open my project here, you can see the Amplify folder created by command that we run earlier. And in that you can see some directories created by Amplify. So one is Auth. Here we'll define the configuration. By default, we have login with email true. And so basically we'll get a form to enter email and password and create account. And if we want to add external provider here, we have the property external providers, and that actually accept couple of properties, like we have Google Auth, we have Facebook Auth, and other options as well. In this case, we'll choose Google here. And inside Google, we need to pass the client ID and client secret. One thing to note here, we should not always hardcode the values here. What we need is to create the environmental variables, or we need to secure the API keys instead of hardcoding inside our code, so we can protect and secure the code and the secret keys as well. Now Amplify also provide a way so we can store the API keys inside sandbox, and once we run the sandbox command, Amplify expose them dynamically, so we don't need to hardcode it. Now to do that, I'll open up the terminal and we'll store the secret keys using the sandbox command. So here I'll run the command npx ampx sandbox secret set, and then the name of the secret, client ID. Alright, so let's copy the client secret and paste it here. We need one more secret here, so I'll copy the command again. I'll type the name Google client secret, and let's copy the secret and paste it here. Alright, so secrets values are stored and we can use inside the code. So inside this project, let the property client ID, and we'll import the method secret from Amplify, and we'll give the name of the secret. And same thing for client secret. Other required field that we need to add are callbacks URL. Here we can add multiple callbacks URL, but for now we'll add localhost. So you can also add production site links here, and also we'll add logout URL. It also accepts array of URL. And one more property that we need to add here is scopes inside Google object. So by default, when Cognito try to authenticate with Google, it passes these scopes, and for some reason Google throw an error message if our configured consent screen is not matching with the scopes we are sending. For that reason, we have to explicitly define the roles here. And in our case, we are interested in email. So that's it, and now we need to run the sandbox so we can deploy these resources on AWS cloud, and we'll be able to test on Frontend. So let's deploy all the changes using the command npx ampx sandbox. Now, as you might know, it's using CDK behind the scene, and it compile all the code to generate the YAML file, and then it will deploy the YAML file to CloudFormation, and then the CloudFormation will deploy the resources to each service. Now meanwhile, what we can do is to configure our frontend, and then we use the authenticator inside signup component that will allow user to sign up. So I'll open up the new tab here. We need to install one more package here that is called Amplify UI React, that basically provides us the authenticator built-in component. Now to install the package, let's run the command npm I AWS Amplify /UI React. Now once the package installed, let's move to project directory here and create one more folder which will called component, and inside components I'll create one more file which I'll call auth client. First we need to import React from React, and then we need to create one more component here which is called auth, and inside this component we'll call authenticator component that we installed from UI React, and here we need authenticator provider and dot and then provider. So what I miss here, I need to make the extension tsx instead of ts. Alright, and here we need to import Amplify configuration file that we need. So we'll configure Amplify. Now import Amplify. Now using the sandbox command, we have Amplify output JSON file that we need to import inside this component so we can configure it. Now to do that, let's import config, choose the root directory here / and then import output file. Now we'll call configure method from Amplify. Now we also need to add SSR to true as we are using server-side rendering. So let's add SSR to true. Now to resolve this error, we need to pass children property inside this component, and we'll get this children property from props. Let's define the type here. Okay, so we are done with our auth client component, and we need to import this inside layout file. Now before we do that, since this is the client component, we need to use client so we can import inside server component. Let's add use client here and save the file. Now inside layout file, I'll import and use auth client. Simply call auth and import it. So you need to pass children as props there, and we are done. Now we can create sign up component and use the authenticator. Now inside components, let's create a new file, sign in .tsx, and inside that let's create component sign in, and we need to call authenticator component from AWS UI React library. Now we also need to make this component client side so we can use it inside the page. To do that, let's add use client directive here, and we'll create sign up page here. Inside that, let's create sign up file. Now let's call sign in component here. So we are done with our flow, and let's run the development server to test our changes. Let's run dev. Let's go to sign in page here. We can see the Google form here, but it's the rough styling here. Now to make it attractive, we need to import styling file from Amplify. To do that, let's go back to sign in page here and import styling file here. Now if you go back to browser, our form is now looking good. So let's sign in. Now here you can see we got the error and it is not allowing us to sign in. This is because if you remember, we didn't enter the callbacks URL when we were creating the credentials on Google account. So now we need to enter the callbacks URL that we are getting from the Cognito. So to see our callbacks URL, let's open the terminal here, and if you go back to the sandbox terminal, you can see we get couple of properties there. Now you can see we have auth Cognito domain. That domain we need to enter in credential screen. So let's copy this property from here and open up the Google Cloud project here and select API and services. Inside this dashboard here, you can see we leave these properties empty, so we need to add these, and let's paste the domain, and below that we need to add another URL here, but this time we need to add some params here. So we need to add /auth to /idp response. Okay, and in the start we also need to add HTTPS. Let's save our changes. If you go back to our app and try again, we should be able to see the login screen and hit enter. Continue, and we are authenticated. Now to see the user's email or credentials that we got, now we need to add some functions inside our code to get those properties. Now inside components, I'll add Amplify util file. And here we need to import get current user from Amplify. So we'll use that function inside the code to get the current session of the user. But remember, we are working with server-side components, and we cannot directly use get current session inside server components. So what we have to do is to map the current session with server runners functionality, so we'll be able to use those functions inside server components. Now to do that, we need to install Next.js adapter package. So let's open the terminal here, and now to install that, let's run the command npm @AWS Amplify /adapter for Next.js. Now once done, let's import create server runner from adapter Next.js, and it accepts the config file that we need to import. So to import the config file, found root and then select Amplify JSON. Okay, now this server runner return us function here run with Amplify server context, so that we can use to map the get current session. For this we need to export an async function. Let's name it get auth user, and in this function we'll call the running with Amplify server context, and with that we use get current session from Amplify. We'll write the code inside try catch block, and in case of error we return false. Then let's create variable current user, await, and let's call on with Amplify server context, in which we'll first pass the cookies in next server context property. We'll import this cookie from next headers, and below that we need to add an async function. In that we'll call context spec, and we return we get current user, and we'll pass context specs in that. Let me remove this and add the property here. We need to pass cookies inside the object. Here we also need to return current users, and we are good to go. Now we need to import this get auth user inside server component to use the user details. From inside page.tsx, I'll first make the component as async, and then I'll call get auth user, and we'll store it inside the user variable. And let's console the user. If you open up the terminal, I forget to add await, just add that and save. Now if you refresh the page, you can see the user's properties here. We get the user name and the user ID from Google, Now we can get the user name and user ID, but to get the user email, we can call fetch user attributes and can get the email. Now to do that, let's get back to that file again and just duplicate this function, and let's change the name to fetch user attributes, and instead of get current user, we'll import the fetch user attribute function from Amplify OAuth server, and everything else will remain the same. Now here, if we call get fetch user attribute and save it, from if you open the terminal, we get the email. So let's refresh, and now we get the email of that user that we can use inside the code. So let's remove the Next.js code here, and we'll use user.email, and we get the user email. Now that's how we can use the attributes on server side, and we can use the external identity providers in Next.js with AWS Amplify Gen 2. So I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please subscribe the channel and comment below if you really enjoy it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again.